Welcome to today's webinar on ADHD families, how to thrive and not just survive. Just bear with me while I get our other team coaches to join the webinar as panelists. We had a little bit of a hiccup when it comes to technology, which tends to happen quite often with ADHD and Zoom in particular. But here we go. We've got Eleni here, who is our parent coach. Welcome, Eleni.
Hello, good morning.
And we should have Ben joining us soon. Hopefully he hasn't got the wrong link. It can be very difficult navigating IT things, but welcome, and thank you for joining us today. If you are a parent of a child with ADHD, you will understand how difficult this can be, but it can also be very rewarding at times, as we know. And we want to be able to be thriving more than we're feeling like we're just surviving. So I wanted today to introduce you to Eleni, our parent coach, and hopefully Ben will be joining us soon as our kids coach, and just to talk to you about how we can kind of maximize those moments where we can thrive. Because as a parent of children with ADHD myself, before I knew about ADHD, before I knew that I had ADHD, the kids had ADHD, things were just absolute nightmare at home. It was a toxic kind of environment. And I felt completely hopeless, helpless. And then once I found out about ADHD and what was going on in the family, and then I was able to actually get some support through coaching, training, and it just has made a world of difference, because it's looking at your child through the ADHD lens and helping them look at themselves through their ADHD lens, because they're going to be doing things that they're not proud of. They have real difficulties controlling their emotions. But these kids, and you know your own kid, these are beautiful children. They've got the biggest hearts. They would literally take, the shirt off their back for someone in need. And as a parent, I'm sure when they've really seen you in need, they've been able to kind of get out of their own heads and out of their own way to really be there for you. That's what I've found with my kids with ADHD. So it's about being able to kind of hold that space, not just for yourself, for them as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, Eleni, I'm going to hand over to you, and Ben has joined. Hello, Ben. So yeah, I'm going to hand over to Eleni and Ben. You're in capable hands, and I guess I'll join just towards the end.
Okay, bear with me one moment while I share my screen. There we are. Okay, can you all see that? Sorry, can you see that?
No, what I'll do, I'll share the screen. How about that?
There, thank you very much. Technology is not my strong suit, I'm afraid. So thank you for bearing with us.
Okey-doke. Here we go. Can you see this? Is it working now?
Yes, that's
excellent.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie.
No worries.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you all for being here this morning. As Stephanie said in her introductions, we are here today to chat about not just surviving, but thriving in a household with an ADHD person, with an individual with ADHD. So my name is Eleni Sfaroudis. I am from America. I had a coaching practice there for a couple of years before I moved here to the UK. And I'm thrilled to be part of the ADHD Advocate, and I bring to the team the perspective of not only a parent of a child with ADHD, but also as someone that was diagnosed later in life when my own son received his diagnosis. So I will offer that perspective through our coaching and training offerings. I also am here today with my colleague, Ben Isaacson. I'll turn it over to Ben to say a few words.
Hi there. So thanks, Eleni. So I'm Ben. I'm an ADHD coach. I specialise working with children with ADHD. I worked previously in education as a teacher, working with quite a lot of SEN pupils. So I have quite a lot of experience in this area. And I love working with children. So together, Eleni and I are going to giving you both angles from the parent's perspective and ADHD from the kid's perspective.
Yeah, so What we thought we'd do is give about 20-25 minutes of chatting through a presentation and leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So let's get started. We'll share with you a few statistics about ADHD, and it is a very common neurodevelopmental condition. Most people don't outgrow their ADHD. And it is highly genetic. So the fact that you may be a parent with ADHD and have a child with ADHD is completely expected. ADHD can be difficult to diagnose. It also can appear different in certain individuals in certain situations. For example, girls versus boys. Girls can tend to present very differently than boys with ADHD. There's also 3 types of ADHD. We have the combined, we have hyperactive and inattentive. And those are bits we get into more detail in our parent training and coaching. So when parents have ADHD themselves, and I can speak from firsthand experience, it can be really hard to not only manage your home and your family, but also your child that does have certain challenges, if you will, when presented at home and in the family setting. It's hard to be present and engaged sometimes as a parent with ADHD because our brains also, like those of our kids, we're wired for interest. We have a very interest-based nervous system, which means when something is authentically interested to us or to our kids, we are kind of all in. And you may see that with your children if there's an activity that they find themselves particularly interested in, and it's really hard to get them to transition away or to switch gears or to move on to something else. In addition, it can be really hard to bear that in mind as you parent. We can become frustrated. It is really hard sometimes to maintain our composure. It can be exhausting managing the needs of everybody in your family. And sometimes this can lead to feelings really of feeling, sort of helpless and exhausted. And we can tend to blame ourselves for things that go wrong. But I want to make sure that you understand that this is not, ADHD is not due to bad parenting. ADHD is not something that you've caused or you can fix or change. It is not something that it can just go away. But the good news is that's why we're here. We are here to help you understand how important it is to look at your family through an ADHD lens. I just want to read this quote by Thomas Brown. He is really an authority on ADHD. Family members can severely exacerbate the difficulties of someone with ADHD if they do not adequately understand the true nature of the disorder, and if they tend to punish that individual with harsh and repeated criticism based on the erroneous assumption that ADHD impairments can be overcome simply by willpower. This is really the core of what we do here at the ADHD Advocate and also through parent training and coaching. Our kids are not willfully disobedient. And as Stephanie said in her opening remarks, they have really big hearts in most cases. These other symptoms that can get in the way and cause us and people who don't understand the condition to focus on the negative. And as we'll see, this can really be detrimental to them throughout their lives and in the long run. Today, we're going to look at 3 areas most affected by ADHD at home. And that's how it affects the rest of the family, your child's self-esteem, and something called rejection-sensitive dysphoria. And Ben is going to talk about the importance of structure and routines.
Yeah, structure and routines are huge. A lot of you, if you have kids, you'll probably be familiar with those mornings, those early morning routines with your kids. It's probably a huge mishmash of different things, really chaotic in the mornings. So it's important to realize that having those routines in place for your kids makes things run so much more smoother. The child knows what they should be doing, and as a parent, if you know that too, you can both work together. And consistency is what makes it so challenging is that consistency is so difficult for people with ADHD. That's why both parents and kids have got to be in sync with one another when being have that accountability as well.
Yes, yes.
Basis.
We're going to talk a bit more about structure and routines in a second, but the first part of supporting ADHD in the family, and especially as a parent, is to readjust our expectations. Often we believe that things can happen in a way that maybe isn't really realistic for your family. It would be so nice if we could plan and predict and have family events go off without a hitch, but we all know that that's not how life is. And when you add the dynamic of some very strong personalities, often things can go, very differently than we expect. So this is especially true when we consider siblings and maybe a spouse that doesn't have ADHD. Educating them and acknowledging their feelings is really important to the family dynamic. There may be kids in the family that don't understand ADHD, and helping them do so sort of at their level is something that Ben and we offer as part of our family coaching offering, to educate them as well as the spouse or you as a couple to recognize and support what you're seeing. We also talk about readjusting, and this is part of that ADHD lens Stephanie mentioned earlier, what you can accomplish. Maybe as parents, we set out certain expectations about what we want to do, but recognizing the limitations often doing so can really adjust how we feel that we can get things done.
Yeah,
I think,
if I could just add to that, on the previous slide on managing expectations, I think it's really important to get out of that mindset of being of wanting to be a normal family, a normal conventional family, and recognizing that that doesn't exist, because I can imagine lots of you probably may seek to have that perfect family life, having dinner together every single evening, no phones out on the table, and having all these really fancy rules in place. It's always good. We always say over here that we aim for excellence over perfection. So yeah, come back to that.
That's a very important point to consider. Another thing that can be affected by all of what Ben has just described is self-esteem and something called rejection sensitive dysphoria. This is a description coined by a psychiatrist, Dr. William Dodson, and it's really the core of what ADHD, people with ADHD can take most to heart and be most almost crippling or devastating about this condition. It's the severe sensitivity to rejection, criticism, and teasing. And it's not even just that, it's the perception, which often can be far worse than what's actually happening. People with ADHD tend to have difficulty regulating their emotions as well. So this can just exacerbate what's already going on. We've seen that this has become, quite even more of a challenge with the pandemic, and children especially not being used to socializing and engaging and interacting. So perhaps they are even more heightened to the perception that they're being rejected, certainly for adults as well. And with social media, that we're on or our kids are on, this is just a very, unfortunately, a place where this can happen, quite a bit. So we want to just raise awareness that repeated, not changing this perception can really be devastating for a child over time. Internally, they can really stay ruminate, and resentment and anxiety can build. And when they externalize it, you've all seen it, I'm sure, a tantrum or flash rage or really just an outburst.
Yeah, it causes such a challenge as well when it comes to disciplining children and telling them off, to be able to do that in the right way so that the child doesn't get into that RSD ruminative state, like you just said, Emily.
Yes, yes. And the last bit is the importance of structure and routines. And something else that we've talked about with ADHD is something called time blindness. And that goes into another hallmark of ADHD, which is hyperfocus. And I'm sure you've all seen that, if not with yourself, certainly with your children. When the ADHD brain is really engaged and fueled by authentic interest, it can be really hard to deviate from that task or that activity, which can be great. And in our training and our coaching, we talk about recognizing this interest and turning it into something that you can excel at, or that your child can really excel at. So that's a really good thing, but tempering it and living with it is quite another, and something that we talk about in our coaching and our training sessions. We also want to acknowledge working memory. And my colleague has mentioned a really great analogy to think of working memory like a Post-it. So there's only a certain amount of information you can fit on a Post-it. And when that Post-it is full, things just get dropped. And that's kind of how the brain is with working memory. When it's at capacity, or you just can't, do anything more, things start to get lost. And this is a real challenge for the ADHD brain. The idea of a structure and a routine to minimize the amount of time you need to spend thinking about things that you don't need to can really be reduced, and it will. And working memory doesn't become an issue. But Ben can talk a bit more about structure and routines as well. You're on mute. Yes.
Thank you, Eleni. Coming on to some of the other items on this slide as well. When it comes to establishing those routines, the issue is that kids with ADHD hate being told what to do. Some of you might be nodding your head there in the background. They really hate being, adults with ADHD hate being told what to do as well, but kids even more so, which is why giving them the menu of choices is so important. It sounds like I know it sounds really small. You might be thinking, but if I'm giving my child 2 rubbish choices, what difference does it make? But at least you're reframing their mind, and you're giving them options, so at least they can think they can take less the bad one. You're giving them, even when it comes to just asking them even if you don't want to give them choices, still giving, instead of forcing them what to do, ask them what it is, what would you want to do instead. Giving them ownership is so important, and you'll be able to notice the difference straight away. Yeah.
Yes, responsibility and ownership and ultimately control. So it's not sort of an adversarial relationship that you're encouraging. It becomes more collaborative. And really that's what our kids want, right? To be sort of heard and understood. And doing so is sort of the first step to getting them and you to shift your approach on how you can approach what their needs are, and your own as well. What can I do as a parent? I know from firsthand experience, it is so important to prioritize yourself and your self-care. And speaking from experience, how often do we as parents put our own needs well behind those of everybody else in our family? And doing so is just simply not sustainable. We can't parent from a place of exhaustion and being depleted. We really need to look after ourselves so that we can be there for our family. And part of that self-care is ADHD education. And we talked a bit about how shifting a perspective and looking through a different lens can enable that. But there's really more to it than that, to understand what you can do proactively and as a family to help support and better understand where your child is coming from. it's also important to shift your perspective and become your child's champion, and to really recognize that that there is a lot of good in them. And as we've said, sometimes it's really easy for these kids to get used to hearing the criticism and the negativity, but they need to know that their support begins at home, and we need to be their biggest fans and their biggest cheerleaders. And on the flip side of that, we have to allow our children to be heard and to give them a voice. And that is really at the core of our kids coaching program, which Ben leads.
Yeah, just giving you some ideas on how to support your children with ADHD in different scenarios. So with emotional regulation and with mood swings, often it can be difficult for kids with ADHD to pause, to have that pause in between responding. And one really useful technique could be to supply your child with a little balloon that they can blow into to get all their energy out when they're walking around the house and they need to pause, take a breath. Having that balloon in their pocket can be a useful pause mechanism for them to use. With organisation and chores, which are boring for kids, for instance, brushing teeth. One of my favourite tips for brushing teeth is to do it with music, or unloading the dishwasher if your kid is at that age where they're being taught to unload the dishwasher or do the washing, to do these boring tasks with music or a podcast. I still listen to podcasts when I do lots of boring chores. Having pets for your animals as well, because of their have that unconditional love and that sensory stimulation from animals is huge as well. That can be difficult for lots of families, so I do understand.
So Ben brings up some really great points. So taking maybe an area that is a challenge for your child with ADHD and structuring it in a way where it's not only engaging, but sort of fosters some ownership, and you can kind of expand on how that habit is becoming embedded. That is an area we spend a lot of time with as well in coaching and parent training, but it just goes to, it speaks to the way that we recognize the shift in thinking and how we are allowing our kids to become part of the conversation that we're having and the choices that they're ultimately able to make. I love this quote by Dr. Hallowell because it really speaks to the core of what we want to, of how great the stakes are. If an individual doesn't believe he can produce excellent results, he holds back not from laziness, but from fear and defeat. And this is important because this, I think, really captures how high the stakes are when we don't shift our thinking as parents and look for the good in our kids. And in turn, they can see that good in themselves and foster it and grow it. And we as parents, have the duty to make sure we give them every opportunity to do so. So Ben started talking a bit about this. What activities can help kids with ADHD thrive?
Yeah, so outdoors as well. They get that stimulation from the outdoors too. So plants using lots of ADHDs have green fingers, planting different things, and often it can be practical for me to coach kids outdoors too. From that perspective, fidget toys are also really helpful. Yep, it's good for parents to get out of the house as well, and into board games, family board games, and anything that it varies depending on each child's processing modalities, which is something that we discussed during coaching. So depending on whether they prefer touch or visual or audible modalities, that will depend on where how they take in information. And if that is being satisfied, then you'll be able to help your child thrive in any environment, whether it's studying, whether it's in the classroom, or whatever that might be. So yeah, that's something that we could always discuss in more detail another time.
Yes. Great. So just to reiterate, we at the ADHD Advocate are here to support you in a number of ways. We offer parent training. We offer individualized coaching. We have something new called a parent circle, which is going to be a monthly meetup and sort of an informal way to have a discussion about parenting, really whatever topic. We will figure it out. Also ADHD Unlocked, which is a fantastic membership community, which provides really weekly support and information on a topic related to ADHD. And lastly, advocacy services, including EHCPs. But we are now happy to take some questions. I see there may be a few in the chat, but we are happy to answer them.
Yeah, well, somebody's just asked about schools, and they raised such an important point because like Stephanie's just written here, they do need to get educated, and what I've noticed having taught in schools is that having a teaching assistant often isn't enough for a child, because school and home life are both intertwined with each other. So having somebody to work with, who's a specialist who understands ADHD, working with them week in, week out, in the domestic life, will help them with their school. It's not enough just having a TA in the classroom, especially with the size of classes these days.
Yeah, a lot of the local authorities, because what we do at the ADHD Advocate as well is we offer advocacy services, and we can help parents with education, health and care plans. And I come from a legal background, so it's something that I do, and I did it for my own daughter as well. And they did offer Ben a teaching assistant, and that was not appropriate to meet her needs. So basically, it's again kind of arguing with the local authority, who obviously they're very much restrained by their budgets, but it's important that your child gets the support to meet their needs, and that's the law as well. Just a point about the schools. Unfortunately, schools aren't very well educated when it comes to ADHD in particular, also in relation to the children's legal entitlements to support at school. So it may be that you've gone to your SENCO talking about your child trying to get support, maybe even mentioning getting an EHCP for your child, and the SENCO may have said, no, she or he is not that bad enough, not so severe. No, they don't need an EHCP. That is exactly what I was told for my daughter. And until I looked into it myself and got across this, I realized that was not the case. And I did go on to get her an education, health and care plan. And I mean, the difference has just been literally transformed her life, because she's now at a school that understands and caters for her needs, and she's thriving. She loves her school because, everyone, have got the same kind of humor. They're all like her. She doesn't feel different, and they're just supporting her and really focusing on her strengths. So really important. Don't just take the school's word for it. If you do have any questions, do come out to us, let us know. I just saw from a comment here, it's not legal in Ireland yet to have an education plan. Oh, I don't know about Ireland, but they would, wouldn't they have? I would have thought they'd have some kind of something similar to something like that. I definitely will have a look at that for you. So do get in touch with me, and so I can send you an email around that. And Eleni and Ben, so we've got another comment here. Teachers are treating my son like is poor parenting. It is not on. It's not right. It's not fair. before I get a bit too impassioned about it. Eleni, Ben, do you have any advice on this one?
Oh, Connie, I have absolutely been where you are. My son was placed in a preschool, and I remember this so clearly. I went to register him, and he, you know, I'm still, I can't talk about it. She said, well, you know, you're not seriously thinking of enrolling him here. And I said, well, of course. I mean, why not? His sister went here. It's a great school. Well, we can't handle him. And it was just like a dagger to my chest. But in retrospect, that was probably the best thing that ever happened. I did seek a diagnosis, and he wound up in a school that supported him. And today he's a 16-year-old that is thriving. And if I hadn't had that bit of cold water, I'm afraid it was, in a very harsh way, I might add, I don't ever condone that, but it helped open my eyes to recognize that what somebody else saw was not what I saw. And in fact, there was a neurobiological difference there that I needed to acknowledge and understand. And that put me on the path to realizing it's not poor parenting, it's not discipline, it's not anybody being ill-equipped. It's simply a condition that needs to be better understood.
Yeah. So yeah, we are actually creating a teacher training course, a CPD course for teachers. So they've got that incentive there to get their CPD points, but we're going to make sure that they're getting the right information, because it is important. ADHD still is not as well understood as it should be, even with professionals working in the special needs area. So we're really keen to get some really accurate, helpful advice to these teachers. So that should hopefully be available towards the end of the year. But there's another question here. Is it worth getting an EHCP for a 15-year-old or 12-year-old? Yes, definitely. Definitely worth it, because EHCPs, they cover the child in education up until, I think it's either 25 or 26. I'm not very good with remembering numbers off the top of my head, but it's definitely either 25 or 26. They extended it. I think it used to be either 18 or 21. And just like a few years ago, they extended up to 25, 26, which is probably why the local authorities are now so reluctant to provide any funding, because it has opened up kind of more education, health and care plans. But yeah, definitely. And again, the Senko that said not severe enough, please don't listen. Don't listen to the Senkos unless they are experts in the SEND legal framework and they understand the test to be applied to get an EHCP, then that their advice is not really very helpful. So maybe we can have a chat about that again, because I am coaching your daughter, so I can have a chat to you. Just we can have a chat about this offline, and if you need any direction in getting this into place, we can do that. I just finished writing an appeal actually for a boy, a high school student doing his GCSEs. We applied for an EHCP. As expected, the local authority applied the wrong legal test. They used their policy and said, no, he looks like he's getting the support he needs, so he doesn't need one, they basically said. Now, most parents, if you didn't have that help, the understanding of the law, then you're going to just listen to the local authority. After all, authority, right? If the council has said no, well, that must mean I can't get one. Not true. A lot of local authorities, probably pretty much all of them, apply their own policies, which are actually, a lot of them are illegal, and they don't know the law themselves. But once they realize that you do, they back off. And so that's what we did with this high school student. They basically conceded the appeal. He's now got an education healthcare plan. The placement's not right, so we're appealing that, and hopefully we should be able to get the placement, the school that he actually needs, and that will meet his needs. But yeah, it's a bit of a process, not for the faint-hearted. And there are things like I think it's Markfield, like your local Sendias, IPSI. There are charities as well that could definitely help with this stuff, and we can provide you with information and signpost you to those services as well. But for anything that gets a little bit more complex, or if you don't have much time, and yeah, definitely reach out to us. But I'm actually thinking we should do a webinar next month, October, ADHD Awareness Month. Let's do a webinar on the legal stuff, how to get things like EHCP or other support in school. So yeah, stay tuned. I'll send some information out around that.
And if you do have any questions, do write them down, and for that we can discuss them next time.
Yeah, I'm just having there a lot of EHCPs.
Yes.
Oh, good. That school suggested an EHCP. Yeah. The other thing, just having a read. 2 weeks in those things. After school clubs, they encouraged us to let him attend. Now they're saying his behavior isn't appropriate, so can't attend. Yes. Well, that's also illegal. That is discriminative. That's discrimination. So again, I do get in touch. I can provide some legal, even just a bit of legal wording, just to kind of repeat to the school, to that extracurricular provider, can be enough to get them to change their tune. Yeah, it's really not. It's just not right. It's not right. So we definitely at the ADHD Advocate, we're all about empowering parents to be able to advocate for their children. So again, do reach out. But next month, and I'll try and put this on earlier next month, on the legal rights, because that's when, yeah, it's really important that you've got that kind of force behind you, right? Yeah. But any other questions in relation? Yeah, legal help. Yeah. So it's difficult, isn't it? Because it is so important that the kids are getting the help in the home setting, at school. There's you can get these EHCPs in place, but again, if the provision in the plan isn't appropriate, then the EHCP is not going to be very helpful. So you've got to make sure you've got the right things in the education, health and care plan, the right kind of provision that will help. And actually, we're going to be trying to get the councils on board with ADHD coaching, because as Ben can attest to, coaching kids with ADHD, it's just really has a massive impact in relation to the child's self-esteem, and for them to be able to navigate social situations at school. Because Ben, isn't that true? A lot of the issues that you see in coaching is around the social anxiety. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, rejection sensitivity, dysphoria as well. And these all accumulate. All the struggles that kids have, it all comes down to, well, it all contributes to that lack of confidence and self-esteem as well, which impacts, which happens at home and in the playground and at school. So having the kid being supporting the child with those core with that foundation of its understanding the child's strengths, values, building his confidence, understanding the child's ADHD, that will have an all-round positive impact at home and the classroom. And then building on that, once we have those crucial core aspects, then we can build on with some of the other executive function traits.
Yeah. And just to add to what Ben is saying, ADHD has a high instance of comorbidity. So oftentimes it's not just the ADHD that we see. There's often something else that could be diagnosed alongside it. ASD, OCD, anxiety is a huge piece as well. So it's really important to work with a clinician that is experienced in these areas. And something we can talk about, maybe another webinar, is medication. And that is a very personal family decision, which we can take offline, but it can be transformational. But certainly it is something that varies by every family.
Yeah, I mean, it was certainly for our family, it was transformational, absolutely. But it does vary. No two ADHDs are the same, and they react to medication differently as well. Sorry, just looking at this comment from a participant saying, one teacher told our son, your parents must be ashamed of you. That just is not, that's just not on. And this is, the problem is, we should, we can only do what's in our own control. So with the schools, there's only so much we can do. We can train them, but that doesn't mean that they're going to behave in the right ways and say the right thing. So what's even more important, again, it's about getting the story right in your child's head. It's the child that needs to be able to really understand and believe the right story, that actually know that they are a good child, that they have this thing called ADHD, and it makes it difficult to control their emotions. That and so, you know, developing that self-compassion, so that even in the face of comments like that, your child knows that, no, this is just a teacher that doesn't know what, you know, I mean, not in an oppositional defiance way, but this teacher doesn't understand. But your child, you know, does understand that it's not a case of that, you know, the child being a terrible child, but that this stuff is difficult and the child is trying, because, yeah, it's that narrative that we really work on in the kids coaching. Ben really works on with the kids to really get it and be able to differentiate between the ADHD and a character flaw, or like a willful defiant behavior, versus really what is fear. A lot of the time, isn't it? It's that fear of rejection, or that frustration at the lack of understanding, because that's also makes them fearful. So when someone doesn't understand you, and a child doesn't understand themselves, that's going to make them fearful, which usually leads to anger. And that's where a lot of the meltdowns that we see, that's why they're happening. So the more that understanding is there, the less the meltdowns should occur. So that's what we're all about here.
So somebody has been asking about the workshops. So we've got the ADHD Unlocked workshops, which I think is what the listener's referring to, which is just for adults. Stephanie, do you know more about that?
Yeah, so that's why we've developed, so any adult that we work with, any parent, will automatically come into our ADHD Advocate Parent Circle, which will be running every month for parents. And so, again, I think Eleni was saying maybe we'll theme it, maybe a little bit of information delivered at the beginning, but then the rest of the time, a place where parents can ask questions and swap strategies, generally support each other. So that's for adults. In terms of the kids, I mean, again, really interested to find out what would be helpful for you. And if that is maybe like kids coming together and facilitated by Ben, who obviously was a teacher, I'm sure he'd love to run groups like that. Yeah, he like literally, Ben has got the most amazing ear that I've ever witnessed when it comes to coaching kids. He really just holds the space and is genuinely interested in what they have to say. And, you know, as a parent of kids with ADHD, as a parent with ADHD, you know, you're so busy trying to, you know, organize yourself and do what needs to be done. And we're often feeling really overwhelmed that when our children talk to us, we can't give them that space and that ear that we know that they'd really benefit from. So actually, yeah, when Ben can coach your child and they've got that space, and it just kind of, as a parent, it's like, oh, good, you know, and not to say that we're delegating that responsibility, because of course we have to listen to our kids and we want to, but, you know, it's, as a parent, we also need to be compassionate towards ourselves. If you've got ADHD as a parent, we're going to have limitations, and we do need to put the oxygen mask on first, which is not easy as a parent people pleasing ADHD either. So having that support network when you're a parent with ADHD, with kids with ADHD, you know, the support network is key. Don't try and do it alone. Don't try and do it all by yourself. It's going to set yourself up for a very hard time.
And just to add to what Stephanie's saying, the community of parents, I think is really important to acknowledge and grow. We've all been through something similar, and hopefully by getting together, you know, every month or so, we can learn from each other, and also sort of have a bit of a reality check that this is my reality. This is what happens, and we can support each other and learn from each other. So yes, that too, between the parent training, which is a more structured approach, to the monthly workshop, which we will decide on the topic beforehand.
Yeah, so we've got some FAQs up here. Did you want to, I know we're about coming up to 45 minutes, but so we can either kind of quickly run through these or make these available to participants later, and we will make the recording of this available to you. So you've got that. Maybe your spouse wasn't able to attend. Maybe your teacher might benefit from some education, and you're welcome to share the recording with anyone that would benefit, maybe even the grandparents, because hopefully you guys have got some support from the kids' grandparents. And what we find quite often, because of that generation is a little bit further afield there, they don't really, some of them don't even believe in ADHD. And that's going to be difficult when they're looking after your kids. So definitely happy to share this with say the grandparents, or even the carers, babysitters, nannies of your children. They need to get ADHD educated, so please do share this with them. But yeah, what we'll do, we'll email the details on the workshops and all the offerings, also the FAQs. We could email those. What do you think, Ben and Eleni?
Yeah, we have a handout of FAQs, a lot more than that, so we can send those out afterwards.
Yeah. So we definitely would really love to help your kids. Any questions you've got, particularly on the legal side, feel free to reach out, and we'll give you what we can, because we're very big on raising ADHD awareness and getting the story straight, and helping you and your child tell a more empowering story about ADHD and your family. But yeah, just remember, please don't put too much expectations on yourself and pressure to be thriving. It's you know, it is a lot of the case. A lot of time it is about, you feel like you're just surviving, but again, it's that lens, right? If you've got the right lens, if you understand what's going on, if you've got that support network around you, that there's hope, and there's more cases, more often than not, hopefully you will get you thriving. So yeah, we'll send that information out. But thank you for attending, and thanks Eleni and Ben. Yeah, any final words too?
Yeah,
Thank you all.
Yeah, I hope you've taken something from this today, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next webinar.
Yes, indeed.
You're doing a great job, guys. Okay, remember that. You love your kids, and you are great parents. Okay, remember that. And particularly if you've got ADHD yourself, okay, put that oxygen mask on yourself, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Yes.
Okay. Have a great day. Good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.